Joia Skywing here, and welcome back to another Speed Paint! Today, we're going to be talking about my first moving experience. Moving is one of the most stressful and emotional things you can ever go through as a kid. Not only are you leaving everything you know behind, but you're going somewhere far away and you might never see that place again. And seeing the rooms you grew up in empty is scary and weird. So, I was 12 at the time when my mom and dad sat us all around a table and proposed the idea of moving to us. The others were down for it, but when I was asked, I was a little hesitant. I'm a very complacent person, and I saw no purpose in moving to a place I barely knew. I didn't have much in that house in the middle of nowhere, but it was my home. But since I had no reason to stay and I didn't want to be a pain in anyone else's side, I agreed to it. Our parents found a house in another state closer to a camp I was going to at the time. I'll have to talk about that camp in another video, because boy! So we began packing. One thing about where we were living is that it was huge. We lived in the middle of the country, a good 15 minutes away from any sort of civilization. Not only did we have 2 small sheds and 2 big ones, but then we had our massive house to go through. I got such a tan because I was in the sun so much. It was summer at the time we were moving, so that made everything 10 times worse. It was pretty much inevitable to get a tan in that kind of environment. One day as we were packing, I decided to go to my old bedroom, which was now completely bare, and just look at it. And I remember feeling really sorry for the person who went to that house next and had to deal with my wall that was covered in boogers. Yeah, I was one of them. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear yelling, I hear shouting, I hear screaming. I was immensely confused, but wasn't alarmed in the slightest, because our family were known yellers at the time, so yelling was like completely normal. Someone probably got in trouble, yada yada yada. We could probably yell so loud that we would break your wine glasses all the way in America. Don't tempt us. So I walked out of my room and into the hallway, and I saw my mom run up to me, and she shoved a bucket into me. She was like, "Fill these buckets up now!" And I was just immensely confused, and now I was scared, because I was just like, why are you shoving this random bucket into my chest? Why are you telling me to fill it up? What in the hell is going on? What in the hell did you do? I did as I was told, being the good little girl I was. I just remember feeling really uneasy as everyone else was losing their minds. I was just like, okay, I'll fill up this water bucket. I don't know what's going on, but I'll fill it up. I filled up the bucket and went to the door, and that's when I realized why everyone was flipping out. Our yard was on fire. My parents and older siblings were fighting the fire as best they could, but it was obvious that they weren't succeeding. What had happened was my brother was burning off some rubbish that we had and had left it unattended, and I'm guessing a bit had flown out of the metal container thingy that it was being burnt in and just landed on the dead grass, and the fire began to spread. We had a lot of dead grass in that area. Like, nothing was green. I legitimately thought for a good while that green grass was all fake and it was all a bunch of fairy tales, because all we had was dead brown grass in the place that we lived. I, of course, began panicking because 12-year-old me was aware of bushfires, but didn't ever expect them to happen to us. Of course I did. Why would I at that age? They were fighting off the fire as best as they could. They were trying to get it out. Then something happened that I will probably never forget. And it was at that point where fighting the fire was no longer an option for us. The fire had reached a pine tree, and the entire tree was engulfed with flames in less than 3 seconds. I'm not exaggerating. That actually scared the living daylights out of me. I went from panicking to what I could only describe as pure and utter terror. I was running around in a hysterical fit of fear, telling my siblings that we should run from our house. It was the only thing I could think of at the time. I just wanted out. I wanted to be gone. I did not want to deal with this. I wanted to run away from home and just be like, peace out, bye! After a good minute, our mom told us to jump into our van that we have. Our dad wasn't there at the time because he was checking up on the place that we were actually moving to and was setting up our bed so that we could arrive. And it was at this point that Dad decided he was going to call Mom, and Mom was running around the house at the time. She picked up the phone and was like, "Hi, nope, can't talk now, the house is burning down, bye," and just ran out of the house. We jumped into the bus and realized that someone was missing, our brother. We saw our brother fighting the fires and began screaming at him like a family of lunatics to get into the bus. After a good minute, our brother jumped into another one of our cars and began driving that. He nearly crashed it, but he was fine. We went over to our neighbor's house, and me Me and 2 or 3 of my sisters stayed there while the others raced back to help out the fire brigade that was on their way. We were left in the care of our neighbors because, as much as I was willing to help, there was no way a 12-year-old should be allowed anywhere near a rabid fire, especially one that had gotten that bad. My sisters were trying to cheer each other up with jokes and lighthearted conversation. I just remember not having any of it. I remember snapping at them, saying that their jokes weren't helping the situation and that they shouldn't be making jokes at this time. I now understand what they were trying to do, but at the time their jokes did nothing more than piss me off. To say that I was wrecked over the situation would have been an understatement. I knew full well the amount of stuff that was inside that house that could have been burnt to pieces at this point. So many things that I cared deeply about would have been gone and there was nothing I could do. The one thing I was worried about the most was our cat, Louie. I knew for a fact that Louie was inside the house because he was having difficulties walking around and thus we put him into our sister's bedroom. I thought that if the house had caught on fire, no one would have been there to open the door. They had probably forgotten that Louie was even inside the house. And even if they opened the door, Louie couldn't run away. He was practically immobilized. He would be stuck there and there was nothing I could do to help him. Nothing I could do to save him. I could do absolutely nothing. Through all the stress, through all the tears, and everything I went through that day, there's one thing I can say for certain. We were one of the incredibly lucky ones. By some miracle, the fire had burnt around the actual house itself and didn't touch it. A couple of our sheds went up in flames and half of our yard was burnt to a crisp, but besides that, everything was fine. It was a miracle and I was so happy when I learned that the house was fine. We didn't have any power anymore due to the fact that the tree I saw go ablaze was actually grown over the power lines and thus the cables were burnt, but everything inside was alright, and that included Louie, the lucky adorable thing. And the craziest part about this entire thing was that we had insurance, and the insurance money paid for the cost of our move, which in and of itself was massive. We spent some time afterwards putting water on spots in the ash that were still hot, so we didn't have to go through that again. It took a while, but I think we managed to get most of them. Our neighbors had come over and had decided to take a look at a ute, which was completely burnt out like it was black. Me being the little bean sprout I decided to help them out despite my sister telling me not to. I was being a little shit. So after helping them out with most of it, I was sent away while they finished it off. I went down to the shed that wasn't burnt down where the others were packing up. Then one of my sisters told me that our neighbor wanted to talk to me. I got really excited. It's very rare for someone to genuinely want to talk to me other than work, especially at that age. So me being me, I ran up the hill like a really fast turtle. When I got there, they said that they were really grateful for my help and they wanted to give me something that they had found inside the car. They told me to hold out my hands for it. I held out my hands, slightly confused, and they filled it with coins. And I mean filled it. I have received over $10 worth of coins for helping them out. And this is coming from someone who had never earned money before this point. Ha! See sis? I know what I was doing! Ha! We continued packing over the next couple of days and slept at our Nana's house because we didn't have a bed nor power at our current home. Then after what seemed like a lifetime of sweating in the Australian sun, it was moving day. I walked around our large property and thought of all the little things that I would miss, such as the quartz that would seep under the ground every once in a while, the gap between the trees down our driveway, our family tree, our 2 playgrounds, and above all, just being able to live in the country. I loved living in the country because of how peaceful it was and how much space we had. You could just walk around with the peace of mind that no one was staring at you. You could do whatever you want that was in legal boundaries, or illegal boundaries, now that I think about it. You could do a lot in the country. You could always tell when someone is coming up your driveway because of how quiet it was, and you could just sit outside and be content knowing that you're home. After the sad thoughts that I went through our head, we all got into our bus and we began to drive. I looked back at our house with ash and dead grass surrounding it and knew that my life was going to change forever. This was a massive point in my life. After a long drive, we finally made it to our new home. Our house was a lot smaller than our old one, and we were next to the river. We bought KFC for dinner that night, and I just remember being really tired and just glad there was no more moving to be done. And then the river flooded, which stresses out even more, but luckily I didn't touch our house since we were up so high. It got really close, but we were fine. You just can't win with these situations, I swear. So that's it for my moving story. If you liked it, then feel free to check out my social medias in the description bar below, and I will see you in the next meme when I finally get it done. Bye-bye!